I want to talk to you today about a revolution through loyalty. The Lord has given us a way to bring about reformation, transformation, change to individual lives, families, cities, nations. And there's a lot of tools in God's arsenal that we get to tap into. Some of them are overt. They're very confrontive, or they're much more bold in nature, in that like our teams that go out on the streets and pray for the sick, or go to the football games, or go door to door and look for people that are needing a miracle. But the other aspect of ministry that the Lord's called us to is the covert. That is the subtle. That is where we are like salt sprinkled into society that helps to provoke or bring about change. Maybe leaven would be a better word, where leaven is worked into a lump of dough, and over time it has its effect. There's an aspect of ministry that is just like that. We're going to look at two stories today that beautifully illustrate both of these truths. The truth of the overt ministry, the power encounter, and the covert ministry, the subtle infiltration that brings about transformation. Daniel chapter 4. I chuckle when I hear people talk about the difficult work environment that they have, because they have a boss that sleeps around or steals money or curses a lot or tells dirty jokes. I want you to picture Daniel. Daniel's about 15 years old. An army comes through town, kills his parents, takes him prisoner, castrates him, makes him a eunuch, puts him in the courts of the king, Nebuchadnezzar, trains him in Babylonian language, Babylonian culture, teaches him the worship of false gods, plants him among magicians, witches, warlocks, those who broker in the demonic realm. This kingdom is the most demonic kingdom, I believe, that has ever been on planet Earth. It is the absolute ultimate example of corruption and evil on this planet. Daniel is planted in the middle of that, and he's assigned by God to serve this man Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar is like the ultimate weirdo in the Old Testament. There's two in the Bible that take the cake as far as the bizarre and the extreme. Nebuchadnezzar in the Old Testament and the man of the Gadarenes in the New. These two were almost inhuman in a supernatural way, but demonically empowered and inspired. Daniel's assignment is to minister to this king. Now, this king doesn't have the sense to separate godly prophets from the demonized, demon-possessed prophets. So he's just got Daniel numbered with the rest. Imagine you're trying to illustrate purity and the power of your devotion to Christ, and your boss just keeps numbering you with all the other witches and warlocks. Imagine being in an environment where everybody around you brokers demonic powers. Imagine serving a king who creates an idol of himself and kills anyone who doesn't bow down and worship him. This guy's got issues. This is the guy that Daniel is assigned to serve. What's that? You had a boss like that? Oh, Jesus help. Okay. Are you kind of getting the picture? We're not talking about the king's palace that is demonically inspired. We're talking about an entire city where the demonic realm is so blatantly in the open that just to walk into the city is to live in this oppression. And here's Daniel assigned to live there and minister to the king. Stunning. All right. Daniel had finally earned a little reputation with the king by being able to interpret dreams. So Nebuchadnezzar had a dream that troubled him. Verse 19. Daniel 4, verse 19, page 1239. Then Daniel, whose name was Belshazzar, was astonished for a time, and his thoughts troubled him. So the king spoke and said, do not let the dream or its interpretation trouble you. And he answered, my Lord, may the dream concern those who hate you, and its interpretation concern your enemies. He goes on and he describes the interpretation of the dream. And the bottom line was, King Nebuchadnezzar was about to be judged by God because of his arrogance, because of his self-worship, because of his creating an idol after himself and requiring a nation to worship this idol. The issues that this man has are extreme. And God is about to bring judgment on him. And he gives him a dream first. And Daniel has the interpretation. And he doesn't want to say anything. Now here's where Daniel's loyalty stands out head and shoulders above any other situation that I at least can think of in the Bible, anywhere in the Scripture, is that when Daniel gets the interpretation for the dream, he's very troubled by the interpretation because it means God's going to judge this man. And the king notices his countenance is fallen. He says, you can't hold the interpretation from me. Tell me what it is. And Daniel's response was, I wish this judgment was towards your enemies, not you. Now let's be honest. 99 out of 100, if not 999 out of 1,000 Christians in that position would basically say to the king, I told you so. You reap what you sow. You have been the ungodly king that I've been trying to serve, and God is judging you. Why was God able to bring judgment in this situation? Because there was a Daniel to stand with him. You've got to understand that the Lord will bring discipline where there are people that will stand in mercy and in loyalty. You say, well, we're supposed to be separate from the world. We're supposed to keep ourselves clean from defilement. Yeah, tell that to the Lord, because the Lord assigned Daniel this demonic assignment to work for this king that was so tormented by devils that he builds idols of himself and makes people worship. God assigned him to this task. And what we tend to do is we take the religious principles of staying clean, we use them for our benefit so we don't have to be uncomfortable in a world that's in chaos. When the message of the hour in this situation that so brought transformation to this demonized man that he became one of the two great heroes in Scripture of a transformed life. The one in the New Testament, Jesus ministered to the man of the Gadarenes. It's stunning. Both these stories, we'll read the end of Nebuchadnezzar's life in a moment here. But Jesus, when he ministered to the man of the Gadarenes, the man, here's this guy, he is so demonized. I mean, he's almost inhuman. And he's the worst case scenario of somebody who's under the influence of devils. And he falls at Jesus' feet and worships him. Jesus sets him free. The guy's clothed in his right mind. The city becomes afraid when the guy is normal, which is really a whole hilarious story in itself. Everybody's fine as long as he's tormented, howling at night, eating their cats and dogs. Everybody's fine. But as soon as he's normal, it's like, oh, it's that cult church in town, you know. The power of God's been missing from the church so long that when he shows up, people think it's a devil. But that's another subject. So here they are. They see this man get set free. He's clothed and in his right mind. And it was through a power encounter. What was it? Overt ministry. Jesus confronts the demons in him, brings deliverance to him, brings him into his one-step program, out of darkness, into his marvelous light. The guy gets completely free in a heartbeat. The worst case scenario becomes completely free in one act of deliverance that Jesus ministered to this man. Stunning example of freedom. What happened in the Old Testament? It wasn't a power encounter. It wasn't overt ministry. It was covert, which is just as lethal, just as powerful. Because God took one piece of leaven, and his name was Daniel. And he put him into a Babylonian system that was so defiled, it became to this day the byword, the icon, if you will, the example of corruption. The corrupt, evil empire of Babylon remains to this day as the standard for corruption and evil. And the head guy of that, Daniel was assigned to. And he's planted as one piece of leaven to infect the entire lump of dough. And he lived in that system, and he lived righteously, he lived purely, and when when it would have been the most natural for people to point the finger and say, well, king, you're getting what you deserved. I've served you loyal. I've tried to bring you faithfully to the word of the Lord, but you have rebelled against God and you're getting what you deserved. When most would throw their head into that ring and now oppose the king because they are now under God's judgment, Daniel instead stands with the guy that's about to be judged. And he says, I wish this word was aimed at your enemies and not you. Can you get any sense for what that must have looked like to the guy who's wanting to be exonerated for his righteous stand, and he lives in this perverted culture? They've already wiped out his family. He's got a divine assignment. Can you imagine just the issues of forgiveness that Daniel has to go through just to serve, just to exist in this culture? But now he's positioned at the moment where most of us would fall to the temptation. I told you so. I've been trying to talk to you about this lifestyle you live. And instead, he stands next to him not to applaud sin, not to apologize or say that his idolatrous ways were okay, but he chose to stand next to the guy that's about to go under God's judgment. And he says, man, I wish this one was aimed at your enemies and not you. That kind of loyalty is so extremely rare that when it was expressed in this story, the end result is absolutely amazing. Turn over to verse 34. At the end of the time, I, Nebuchadnezzar, lifted my eyes to heaven. My understanding returned to me, and I blessed the Most High and praised him, honored him who lives forever. Nebuchadnezzar, for 7 years, lived as an animal in a field. Literally, his reasoning, his human reasoning, left him. He grew a hair like feathers. He actually had the appearance of a beast, of an animal. And while he's out there, his reasoning comes back to him. And his first response was what? To give honor and to give praise to God. This is a stunning Old Testament example of the power of covert ministry. That there are times when the secret is the upfront, talking to the person on the street, going door to door, asking the person that you work with, do they need a miracle in their life? They've got stuff going on in their life, saying, listen, I can pray for this addiction to be broken off. And it's this confrontive kind of thing that says, listen, these powers of darkness have been stealing from me. But there are times, and it's only wisdom to know the difference, there are times when the secret to the transformation of a life, of a family, of a city, of a nation is the covert, subtle ministry where we have tremendous respect for the businessman who has been called into business, and we do not want to upset his profit earning capacity in his business by us doing things, standing on a chair in a restaurant and creating a scene so that we can have the benefit of telling somebody about a miracle that we experienced. But instead valuing that person's place in society and working into the system with a long-term effect called loyalty. Loyalty is expensive on the outset, but it pays huge dividends in the long run. That's the way loyalty is. Sometimes loyalty means that you stand next to people that God is about to bring discipline on. Why? Because he wants somebody there to be there when they come to their right mind. Why? Because you will be what they remember. And here we have Nebuchadnezzar stand before God and just lift up praise. This is stunning. Look at verse 37. He says, I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise and extol and honor the King of heaven, and all of whose works are truth, and his ways justice. And those who walk in pride, he is able to put down. Boy, howdy. He had his own personal testimony on that one. What happened? Man of the Gadarenes, power encounter, overt ministry, brought transformation to a region of cities that rejected Jesus. They chased Jesus and the disciples out of town. Jesus sent back the one guy that just got free. The next time Jesus shows up in the area, every person from every village came to hear him. Why? The impact of a power encounter to change a region. We do that one pretty good. Here's the other one. Getting planted into systems that are sometimes dark. I don't know why we expect the unrighteous to live righteously. We get planted into those systems, not to rule, but to serve. To demonstrate the love of Christ. What does it mean? You've got somebody that's going through difficulty because of God's judgment on them. Where do you stand? As close as you can. As close as you can. Why? Because they're going to need you when they come to their right mind. They're going to need to remember what life is supposed to look like. How am I supposed to really respond to the issues of life? Overt and covert ministry. Those two things were used, Old and New Testament alike, to bring about the two greatest conversions, I believe, in the Bible. The man of the Gadarenes and Nebuchadnezzar, who stood before God, and they both ended up as worshipers. They both ended up as worshipers. Here's the call. I'm thankful I don't talk to you as a group that's disloyal, because I see day after day, I see intense loyalty here outside of Bethel in the Christian community of our city. I'm so thankful. I cannot tell you how thankful I am for that. But I feel like we need to turn it up a notch. Where we're planted into the community for this subtle, covert infiltration of the Babylonian system, if you will, where we illustrate true compassion and mercy, illustrate at a higher level what loyalty looks like, where we don't so easily throw in the towel to say, well, that person's getting what he's deserved. Instead, to stand and to pray for the mercy of God to reverse the situation. To be there when they come to their right mind, that they have the standard set in their heart and mind. This is how I'm supposed to live, as they throw their hands into the air and begin to exalt the one true God. This is the privilege that we have in life, is to bring about a reformation through loyalty. God is taking you and me as salt, light, and leaven, and sprinkling us into a system where our very presence of kingdom values, of embracing a lifestyle of intense devotion and loyalty to the people God's assigned us to, that in that environment we have the chance to proclaim a message through lifestyle that could not be put into words. You have no sermons here by Daniel on what loyalty looks like. You have no blowing his own horn saying, you'll notice I stood with you when I didn't have to. All you have is the power of the kingdom. And God says the kingdom of heaven is like leaven that gets worked into the dough until the entire lump of dough comes under its influence. Why did God give you access to everything? Because the assignment you have will require we use everything.